So in this video we are going to create a casting bar, and the casting bar is going to look like this. When you're casting, there's going to be one little icon here, and then the bar is going to go from 0 to max here, and when the cast is done it's going to disappear. As you can see here, the name of the spell is also written on the casting bar, and the time left on the cast is also written over here. Besides that, it's also fading in. When you start to cast it, it's fading in, and I simply just make it disappear when it's done casting. One thing I want to say is that all the things here are optional, which means that you don't need to add the spell icon here if you don't want it. You don't need to add the spell name here if you don't want it. You don't need to add the fade if you don't want. You don't need to add the cast timeout here if you don't want that. So basically I'm going to make sure that everything that we are creating here is optional, so that you can just avoid to implement that little thing if you don't want it in your game. Besides that, yeah, we have the whole world here in this example I have here. Don't mind that, we are going to implement that later, but this is just the sandbox RPG project that I'm using for testing stuff. So the world is here already, but that's something we're going to implement in the future. But in this video we are going to make this little casting bar here. So before we start, I just want to say that I added a new sprite to the RPG asset package. So if you're using my sprites, you need to re-download it so that you can get the casting bar here. And the casting bar is located inside sprites and spells. And the casting bar is simply just a white casting bar. It's the same as the health bar and the mana bar. It's simply just white with a little grayish tint in the bottom. So if you're not using my sprites, you simply need to make some kind of white bar to create this the casting bar. The reason that it's white is because that it's easier for us to change the color. So if I make the casting bar here and change the color, you'll see that the color down here actually reflects this color I'm setting up here. So it makes it easier for us to change the color based on what spell we are trying to cast. And again, you can also just avoid changing the color and use the same color for all your spells if that's what you want. But I tried to look at some popular UI casting bars for World of Warcraft, and I'm trying to replicate some of the most popular things in those casting bars from World of Warcraft with the icon and the time left on cast and the name of the cast itself and the fading out. But let's get started here. So first of all, we need to set up the UI, and to set up the UI we will have to add a new casting bar. So go to the canvas here and right click and go to UI, and then we can simply select an image, and this is going to be our background. So just rename this one to background. Besides that, we also need a casting bar game object, so just duplicate this and rename the new one to casting bar, and then put the background as a child object under the casting bar. The casting bar doesn't need an image, so just right click and remove it from the parent image. So the actual casting bar is going to be the area where we dock our casting bar. So if we select the casting bar and press F over the image here, then we can scale it up and move it down to the position where we want the casting bar to be in. And then simply take the casting bar here, and we already removed the image, so we need to select the background here and change the image. So you see it has a source image here, which doesn't have a sprite. So simply just click on it and write bar, and then find the bar you want, and I want the background here, which is the black one. So if I select that one and set native size, then you'll see that it gets way too big here. The size that I have chosen for mine just goes a little over the edges of the actual spell bar here, but it's totally up to you how you want to put it. So I'm simply going to do like this, I think, and you can scale it up or scale it down, and you can put it exactly as you want it. This is just my preferences. When you have created that, we need to create the actual fill, or the actual bar itself. So right click, say UI and image, and select this little radio button and write cast bar, and select your casting bar, and then simply just scale it down so that it fits inside the black area here. There we go. And I'm going to move all the way out here, and then I'm going to leave a little bit here because I want the spell icon to be here. If you don't want a spell icon, you can simply just drag it all the way out. But I'm going to leave a little area here for my spell icon. And I might also move it a little in here if I want a little more dark area here on the right side. That's again up to you. So when I've done that, I would like to rename this one to fill. This is my fill image. And I'm going to say that the image type here is filled. And it's going to be horizontal from left to right. So that I can start doing this, right? Like so. This is my cast. When it starts, it's here. And when it ends, it's out here. So now we already have that in place. Besides that, we need our icons. So right click, say UI and image. And rename this one to icon. And let's just add a placeholder icon for now. So just write fire, for example, here, and take the fireball. And then just scale it down so that it fits inside this area here. I'm going to zoom more in so it's easier for us to put it. And there we go. So when you've done that, you can actually just position it so that it has the same, about the same center line as this other casting bar here. Then you can select the casting bar and move it a little closer if you want to, like so. So just adjust everything until it is exactly as you want it. I actually think I'm not super happy with the size of it. So if you're not happy with the size, you can always take and scale it up a little until it fits the size you want. And again, you can also do this when you're totally done with the tutorial. You can also start resizing stuff and rescaling stuff exactly as you want it. But I'm just going to scale up a little here. Yeah, there we go. I think that's better. When you've done that, we need to add some text. So let's just select the fill here and change the color to some red color. It's easier to see the text. And then right click on background, say UI and text, and call this one spell name. This is our spell name. And I'm going to say that this is going to be in the left side and centered. And then I'm going to use, instead of Arial, I'm going to use this font here and just write something like fireball, just to have some placeholder text. This is going to be changed from a script later. And you can take the color and change it to white. And then I'm going to add a component called an outline, just to make it like outline around it. And yeah, I guess that's how I want it to be. Yeah. So when you've done that, you can right click on spell name and duplicate it and change the name of this one to cast time. So this is going to be our cast time. And the cast time is going to be placed in the right side here. And just write 1.0 or something, just so you can see how it looks. And we're going to clamp it to the right side, align to the right side. I'm going to move that a little in here, like so. Just place it exactly like you wanted. Yeah, pretty happy with that. You can maximize if you want to see how it looks full screen. I think this looks okay. If you think the outline isn't very good, like you can see some white through it or something, you can select the effect color here and you can change the outlines alpha here to 255 and do the same for the spell name as well. So, and then it should be easier for you to see the actual outline around the letters here. So I think now the UI is actually set up as it should. I think there's a little too little space between the fireball and the dark edge out here. So if you think that, you can just select the background and a little larger like so. Yeah, anyway, but now the background, or like the UI is set up and we can start creating our script. Before we create some new scripts, there's one thing we have to do. We have to select our spell script. We need to rename it because we're going to create something else called a spell. And this is a spell script which is attached to a game object in our game world. And just to indicate that, I would like to rename it to spell script. And you'll see why we need to do that in a minute. So select it and call it spell script. And when you have done that, it's very important that you open up the script here. And you go into the file and rename that as well in the file. And when you rename it inside the file, it's very important that you use the rename function. So you select spell here, and you right click on it, and say rename orf2, and write spell script. And it's very important, this spelling here is exactly the same as the spelling out here. If that don't match, then you're gonna have some errors in your project. So now we have a spell script. So the reason that we have that spell script is because I'm going to create a new script called spell. And the spell is going to be a script that doesn't inherit from mono behavior. That's why it's just called spell, and everything that is going to stay in the game is going to call spell script. So that's why how we differ them. Apparently it's hard for me to talk right now. So let's go to scripts folder and click add, and add a new class. You can't see that, that's off screen, but you just click add in class. And then this one pops up, and you call the new one spell. And then you open up the new script there, and you'll see that it has a class called spell. Right now, because I created it like this, it's inside a namespace. And we don't want it to be inside a namespace, so I'm just going to delete the namespace so that I only have spell here. If you created it from Unity, you will have to remove this inheritance from mono behavior, which has a standard. So you have to delete that, because we don't need it to inherit from mono behavior. We need it to be on its own as a standard C# class. So this one is going to define everything that our spells are going to do, like damage and everything. So first of all, we're going to serialize this. So it's going to be serializable. And what else it's going to have? It's going to have a name. It's going to have some damage. It's going to have a sprite. And if you don't have sprite, right click quick actions, and using Unity engine, you can also write it up here if you want, if you can't right click. And icon. I'm going to have some speed on it, and I'm going to have some cast time called cast time, and I'm going to have a prefab spell. It's going to have prefab, and it's going to have a color, bar color. So this is the color of the casting bar when we're casting this specific spell. So this is all the information our spells need at the moment. And of course, these are the things like damage and the speed and the cast time. These can be affected by different stats that we are gaining later. For example, if we put up some gloves with extra speed or something, this will be reduced. Okay, so now we are trying to set it up so that we can increase our stats later and improve our spells. So this is fine, we can set all these. So let's just serialize them, like so. Oh, serialize fields, sorry. Let's do that with all of them so we can set them from our inspector. And there we go, there we go, there we go. And save. So now we have serialized all our fields on the spell. So what we need to do now is to create a new C# script. And go to Unity, just to make it easier for us. Right click, create, and C# script, and call this one spellbook. So we're going to create a spellbook, and the player is going to have the spellbook for now. I don't think I want to create a new object just for that. So just add the spellbook to the player. Just drag it in here so it's right below the player script, or you can put it anywhere else. And we're going to populate the spellbook with some different spells. So how do we do that? Well, if we open up this spellbook, just reload everything. Right here, we can see that the spellbook doesn't have anything, but the spellbook needs to have some spells. So let's make a private spell array. This is the class we just created, and call it spells. That was great. And then we're going to serialize this. And save. So because this is serialized and this one is serializable and all these fields are serialized, we can actually go to the inspector now and start populating our spellbook with spells. So we can select our player, click on the spellbook, and see we have an amount of spells here. Right now in this game we only have 3 spells, but if you have more you can also just put the size larger. But for now I have 3 spells. element 0 is called fireball. And the damage is 5, whatever. The icon, well, I can click here and write fire. This is my fireball icon. The speed is 5 for now, and the cast time is 2.5 seconds, for example. These are all values we're testing out. It's not the final values at all. The spell prefab here, well, we need a prefab for it. And we already have a fire prefab here. So just take the fire prefab and drag it onto the spell prefab. Then we need a color. I'm going to select it here and pick some kind of red, not too dark, not too light. And then I'm going to click OK here. And right now it's totally, the alpha is 0. I need to put it to 255 so I can see it on the screen here. That's my fireball created here. The next thing I need to create is my frostbolt. How did I write fireball? Yeah, bolt, like so, one word. Damage 5, whatever. Icon, let's write frostbolt. Speed 5, cast time 1.5. And spell prefab, can we select it? Let's say frost prefab. And bar color, it's going to be some kind of blue, light blue. No, there, I think. And put the alpha all the way up. And the last one is the lightning bolt. I think it's it's lightning prefab. Thunderbolt, lightning bolt, it doesn't matter what you call it. 5 damage, and icon here is going to be lightning. That's not right. That was not right. It's going to be thunderbolt, it's called here. So basically you can call thunderbolt or lightning bolt. Should rename it also, it's thunder all everywhere, but whatever. Speed 5 and cast times, let's say 1 second. Spell prefab, we need to find the lightning prefab. Go bar color. I think I'm going to go with some yellow-ish color. Let's see, there maybe. Yeah, there. And set up the alpha. That's it. So now I have created a spellbook, and I've added a fireball, a frostbolt, and a thunderbolt to my spellbook. So now the spellbook has some spells. Okay, so I don't think we're going to finish everything in this video, but let's start by setting the color and all these things. And then in the next video, I guess we are going to make the spellbar work and fade out, because there is some work and I don't want the videos to be too long. So I'm going to split it into 2 at least. But let's try to use our spellbook to throw a spell now instead of just using the prefab like we do now. Because right now we have a player, and on the player script somewhere, let's see here, a player script, and we have these prefabs. Well, we don't need this anymore because we have our spellbook with all the spells in it. So these are actually not usable anymore, or useful for that matter. So if we select the player and go to our spell prefabs, we can just delete this, delete the spell prefabs array. When you've deleted that, there should be an error here saying that, well, this doesn't exist, so we need to create a spell now. We can do that from our spellbook, and right now we can create a new function called that returns a spell, and it's going to be cast spell. And it needs an index. It's the index of the spell we want to cast. 0 fireball, 2 1 frostbolt, and 3 thunderbolt, as usual. So we need to return our spells index. So the index we're trying to cast, well, we need to return that spell on that specific index we're trying to cast. And besides that, we need to do lots of things here, but for now we're just going to do this. So as you can see right here, it says inconsistent accessibility by the return type spells, blah blah blah. Spell is less accessible than this function here. This function is public, and the spell class here is private, and I'm not allowed to return something or make something public when the class itself is private. So I need to go to spell here and write public like so. Save. And then it should jump or fix this little error here. So for now we're returning a spell. This spell, we need to create that one, and we do that in our player, and up here we make a spell, called s equals spellbook. So right now the player doesn't have a reference to the spellbook, so he needs a reference to his own spellbook. So we need to go up here and say, yeah, private spellbook, and this one is going to be a reference to the player's own spellbook. So let's just say in start we say spellbook equals get component spellbook. So now the player, this variable here, right here, which is private, has a reference to this script right here on the player itself. Okay. So let's try to go back. So right here we can say is equal to spellbook dot cast spell. So here it also wants an index, and we have a spell index here. We can just feed it that. So why am I allowed to do this? Well, in my spellbook I'm returning a spell, and I'm returning a spell on an index based on this array, and this array here is right here in the spellbook. It's 0 is Firebolt, Frostbolt, and Thunderbolt. So based on the spell index I'm trying to access, it will return a Firebolt or a Frostbolt with all the information here we need to create a spell. So now we're returning that, and as I said, this will be more populated later. So in our player we have our spell called S, and right now this one is a spell script, and I'm not sure if I want it to be S here. Then I want to call this new spell then, so there's no confusion between the two of them. So here, instead of spell prefabs, I'm going to say new spell dot. So right now I can't access anything on my new spell. That's because everything here is private, and I would like to access all these things so that I can change them, or I can not change them, but I can get the information from them, because I need this information out in my player and my spellbook. So basically I'm going to right click and say quick actions and say encapsulate field right on all of them, and there's a right click quick action encapsulate field, and right click quick action encapsulate field, and I can do this and press Ctrl RE. Does exactly the same. Ctrl RE and Ctrl RE and Ctrl RE. So this will create all this code down here. So name, for example, if I encapsulate that name here, it's going to create this. If you can't Ctrl RE or quick actions, you need to write this code by hand. But we only need the get, so we can delete the set version of it, and we can delete set everywhere. Actually, we only need get, because we don't need to change something. When we need to change something, we need to put it as a set value. But I don't need to change my damage from outside right now, so I'm just going to leave it with a get. I don't need to change my speed, my name, my cast time, and everything. It has the correct value from the get-go. I'm just going to delete the set version of it, just so that I don't change it by mistake. Besides that, I'm going to write my name, my in front of them. So why am I doing this? Well, in earlier tutorials, I have gotten some comments about people are trying something and it doesn't work. That's because they forget to use the one with capital letter, and instead they use the one with non-capital letter. And I can see the confusion here. It's kind of similar. This name here can be confused with this name up here. So from now on, I'm going to write my every time I create this, which is a property, so that there's no confusion when I write my name or my something else. Then it's a property. We are always accessing a property when we write my in front of it, so that there's no confusion with the actual field up here. So my damage and my icon and my speed and my cast time and my spell prefab and my bar color. And there's a reason I'm using this capital M and capital B and capital C and everything. It's just so that you don't confuse these with these. Normally this would be enough not to confuse it because it's capital and this is non-capital, but I get that it might be confusing when you're following a tutorial when they're so similar. So that's why we're writing my in front of it. So I hope you understand all these getters here are made so that we can access these fields from the outside. And now when we have created all these getters, or properties as they're called, we are able to go to our player and say, well, new spell dot, and now you can see all these are accessible. All these with the little wrench on them are those properties. So I need my prefab, so my spell prefab. So now I'm actually using the spell prefab to throw a spell. So if we save this, everything should work as before. The casting bar doesn't work yet, but it's actually casting a spell on the target as it did exactly before. But now we are using our spell book instead of using our player's prefabs. So that's one step of the way. The next thing we have to do is to make sure the cast time is correct. Right now I'm waiting for 1 second regardless of what spell I'm casting. Well, I need to say new spell dot my cast time here and save it. So if we save this and jump in here, the cast time should be different. You'll notice that a fireball takes longer to cast than a frostbolt, and lightning bolt is very fast, as you can see. So now we are actually also using the cast time on the different spells, and you're still able to interrupt them, of course, and change the spell to something else. So I think that's what we're going to do in this video. I don't want to run for way too long because this might take like 45 minutes or something to finish up. So I'm going to put the finishing touches on the casting bar in the next video. But I hope this makes sense for you, and if you have any questions about anything of this, then please don't hesitate to ask in the comments. So thanks for watching. Thanks for watching my video. Please remember that InScope Studios is a community founded page, so please consider clicking the support link on the screen to see how you can support me and get something back in return.